Здравствуйте, уважаемые участники международного проекта «Русский язык в Африке. Дорогой, дружбы и сотрудничества». Мы приветствуем вас на втором вебинаре цикла «Россия, Африка. Межкультурный диалог». Меня зовут Богданова Марина, я куратор проекта. Наш проект проводится Центром дополнительного профессионального образования «Альфа-диалог» при поддержке Министерства просвещения Российской Федерации. И рада приветствовать ведущего нашего вебинара Ольгу Сергеевну Кулькову, старшего научного сотрудника Института стран Африки Российской академии наук. Я напоминаю, что мы в прямом эфире и приветствуем всех, кто присоединился к нам сегодня на нашей трансляции. Пожалуйста, напишите, откуда вы смотрите трансляцию. Мы передаем вам привет из Санкт-Петербурга. Hello, dear participants of the international project Russian language in Africa, the way of friendship and cooperation. We welcome you to the second webinar, Russia, Africa, Current Modernity. And my name is Marina Bogdanova. I'm curator of this project. And if you have any questions, you can always ask me. The project is implemented by Alpha Dialogue Center, the Center of Professional Additional Education, with the support of Russian Ministry of Education of Russian Federation. And I'm really happy to welcome our first speaker, Olga Sergeyevna Kulkova, the senior fellow senior research fellow of the Center of the Study of Russian Academy of Science and Institute of African Science. If you have any questions, we will try to answer them at the end of this meeting, and you can write in our chat on YouTube. And also, I would like to remind that if you would like to get the certificate for this course, you need to register, and you can find the link in the description for this video. Olga Sergeyevna, please.
Dear participants, I'm happy to greet you today. And the topic of our lecture is Russia, Africa, actual modernity. What we'll speak about is we'll try to analyze diplomatic, business, and educational relations between Russia and Africa nowadays in the recent several years. With a short retrospective, probably. And also we will discuss the prospects for the further development of these relations. Your questions are highly welcome. And we'll also pay attention to major bilateral and multilateral projects between Russia and African partners. And also, I will discuss the results, tell about the results of the two Russia-Africa summits, first of which was in 2019, and the second was in this year, 2023. Okay, let's start. And first of all, why Africa is so important for Russian Federation? First of all, it is a very critical geopolitical actor of modernity, and it is Africa. We consider Africa as a great partner in the world politics, and Africa is rightfully called the continent of the future. Because it is exactly so. So the role of Africa is constantly growing in the international relations of nowadays. First of all, Africa has a growing and predominantly young population, and the general population of the African continent, according to the UN, will double by 2050, and it will be 2.4 billion people. So this is a huge market and a huge society, and definitely, it's a wonderful idea that many African countries, almost all African countries, decided to unite in the project called African Continental Free Trade Area. So it was signed in 2018, and now it is in the stage of realization. And all the analytics, Russian, be it Russian, European, American, and African analytics, they discuss that the prospects of this project are really great. So the project creates huge emerging market on the continent, and it makes simpler the trade, the travels, and many other things. And it was long awaited by many Africans, and it will open much more prospects for also African geopolitical partners, foreign partners. Also, Africa is rich not only by its human potential, but also is rich in raw materials, which are critical for the development of all technologies, especially high technologies. We may mention rare earth minerals, but also hydrocarbons and minerals and precious metals, and all of these are valuable for all the partners of the African continent. And also, African countries now represent a significant force in a number of international forums and organizations, and their voice is becoming much more audible and significant than previously. So, and all of these determines growing attention of the international actors to build strategic cooperation with the African continent. Everybody like European Union, America, Turkey, other emerging actors, they are all interested now in developing the partnership with Africa. And also for the Russian Federation, it is also very important. Here on this slide, you can see some projections how the African population will grow in future. And we see that in many African countries, which are red on this map, here the population will grow by 100 million or more since 2015 up to 2050. So, and you see that the prospects of these countries are also becoming much more, let's say, interesting and also promising for the partnership. Let's start with diplomatic relations. I'll briefly say about the diplomatic relations. Of course, with many African countries, we have bilateral relations going back to the 1960s, and they were quite good, and the Soviet Union helped a lot to many African governments, many African countries in their liberation struggle, and these ties still exist. However, in the 1990s, there was almost a lost decade for the Russian-African partnership because of the changed vector of that government, and also Russia at that time had its own internal economic and political struggles, difficulties, and this changed in the beginning of the 2000s, and when the President Putin came to power. Also, since then, the African vector of Russian foreign policy has consistently acquired increasing importance, and there were visits by Vladimir Putin and Dmitry Medvedev to the continent. There were several visits. And in general, the Russian foreign policy was shifting in the last decade towards the East. East in general, here the Africa is included also. And in the recent years, starting from the 2020, the pandemic, and then the events of the last year, Russia's special operation in Ukraine, all this caused deep shifts in global politics, and these events led to the change in the world order, and long-term consequences of this change are difficult to predict. But all these events somehow led to the attempts by the unfriendly states to isolate Russia in the international arena, which did not happen. But in this light, the Russian Federation seeks to fully unlock the potential of cooperation with constructively minded partners in the regions such as Africa, the Middle East, the Asia-Pacific region, and Latin America. But speaking about Africa, in recent years, we see how Russian Minister for Foreign Affairs, Sergei Lavrov, paid multiple visits to a range of African countries. In July last year, he visited Egypt, Ethiopia, Uganda, and the Republic of Congo. And this diplomatic mission followed up on the results of Vladimir Putin's meeting in June 2022 with the top leaders of the African Union. EU Chairman Macky Sall and Head of the EU Commission Moussa Faki Mahamat. And also Sergei Lavrov visited African countries 3 times this year already. He visited South Africa twice, Angola. For the first time of the history of bilateral relations, he visited Eswatini, formerly Swaziland. He visited also Eritrea, Mali, Mauritania, Sudan, Kenya, Burundi, Mozambique. So this was, of course, helping to prepare for the second Russia-Africa summit, but I will talk about that a bit later. So the first Russia-Africa summit was a landmark event, and it happened in 2019 in the southern city of the Russian Federation, very beautiful city, Sochi. Its climate is reminding us of tropical countries of Africa. And I was there. It was definitely a historical event. This is the first ever Russia-Africa summit. It was in October 2019, and it was going under the motto for peace, security, and development. So such a large-scale event was held in modern Russia for the first time and had no analogues in the history of Russian-African relations. And it was long awaited. It was long talked about, but definitely it is great that there was political will of the Russian leadership and leadership of African countries to organize it and to participate and to meet and to build new partnerships. And of course, during this summit was talked much about the priority areas of economic cooperation. They were identified, and in which areas to work to receive the results in the coming years. And as a result of the summit, there was adopted a final declaration where the sides agreed upon goals and objectives for the further development of Russian-African cooperation in all its dimensions: politics, security, economics, science, technical development, cultural and humanitarian spheres. And also, it is important that there was created a Russia-Africa Partnership Forum, and it is like a body which develops the relations between the summits and is implementing the decisions of the summit. So it was actively working these years in between of the 2 summits, So another slide from another picture from the first Russia-Africa summit. During the economic summit, there were represented many Russian goods and services under the motto "Made in Russia." What else can we say about the first summit is that official representatives of all 54 African countries worked at the summit, and 45 of them were represented by heads of state and government, and also 8 regional organizations were present at the summit. And during the summit and economic forum, 92 agreements, contracts, and memorandums of understanding were signed, and the total amount of the signed contracts, information about which was not a commercial secret, was more than 1 trillion rubles. By industry, the largest number of documents was signed in the field of export and foreign economic activity, international cooperation, high technology, transport, logistics, mining and geological exploration, and so on. And it was mentioned during the summit that over the previous 5 years of the summit, trade turnover between Russia and Africa has doubled, and this figure had all the necessary for further growth. Today, Africa is home to 6 of the world's 10 most dynamic economies, and thus mutually beneficial partnership with these countries and other countries of the African continent is a fundamental basis for the development of the economies of our countries. Now about the second summit, second Russia-Africa summit, which happened July this year in the very beautiful city, cultural capital of our country, St. Petersburg, where the Alpha Dialogue is also based. So I was also there. It was definitely a brilliant organization, very interesting. And I would like to say what the leading Russian Africanists, Irina Abramova and Leonid Fituny, said about in preparation to the second summit. They wrote it in 2021. They said that the success of the first summit and economic forum was predetermined by the very fact of their holding and the uniqueness of this event in the Russian and African history. But the task for the organizers of the second summit was to consolidate and develop this success achieved in 2019. And they said that obviously the second forum should not be a repetition of the first summit, but a qualitatively new step in the development of Russian-African relations. They stressed the need for the new content for this summit. And it's necessary to move from formulating the goals and objectives of Russian policy towards Africa to the implementation of specific projects and developing mechanisms and tools for mutually beneficial cooperation. So, and I think this wish was implemented and understood by the organizers of the second summit. So the second summit was held in a difficult international surrounding. There was unprecedented pressure from the Western countries on the African countries for them probably not to participate in the Russia-Africa summit, but still the official delegations from 48 African countries were present at the second Russia-Africa summit, and 27 countries were represented at the level of first and second persons, like heads of governments and the countries, and also 5 largest integration associations of the continent took part in the agenda of the summit. And as a result, also the final declaration, the new final declaration was adopted, which touched upon almost all areas of cooperation. But also, Russian President Vladimir Putin mentioned with gratitude that the leaders of African countries have shown political will, independence, and the interest in developing cooperation with Russia, and our country appreciated that. And also, the president announced the launch of an assistance program for African countries in the healthcare sector worth more than 1 billion rupees. Here you can see the photo from the second summit. But what is also interesting that this summit, Russia and Africa agreed on a plan of joint actions until 2026. And at the official ceremony for adoption of these documents, Vladimir Putin highly appreciated the results of interaction during the summit and stated that the Russian Federation and Africa have identified the main directions for further joint work, outlined plans to strengthen foreign policy coordination and increase trade and investment flows and industrial cooperation. In the final document of the summit, Russia and African countries agreed to oppose unilateral sanctions, work to mitigate and lift them for the countries of the continent and also for Russia, and also strengthen cooperation in combating restrictions that put Africa at risk of famine. The food crisis was also given much attention in the declaration and statements of the leaders of the countries. Thus, the final document states that the parties will make joint efforts to ensure food security in Africa on a long-term basis. President Vladimir Putin said that Russian Federation will continue to supply grain to African countries, both on a commercial basis and also free of charge. As a result of the summit, the participants adopted 5 key documents, not only the declaration of the summit, but also the declaration on the prevention of an arms race in outer space, also declaration on cooperation in the field of ensuring international information security, declaration of on strengthening cooperation in the fight against terrorism, and as already was mentioned, the Russia-Africa Partnership Forum Action Plan for 2023-2026. Also, if we talk about commercial agreements, 161 agreement was signed that were not a commercial secret, of which, but the amounts of these agreements this time were not disclosed. And the difference from the first summit is that most agreements were concluded in the field of humanitarian cooperation. And the largest number of agreements were concluded in the following spheres, like international and interregional cooperation 56, education and science 51, scientific and technical cooperation 10 agreements, and export and foreign economic activity also 10 agreements. Here, this slide, sorry, it was in Russian, but I will just translate. It shows this exemplifies the partnership between Russia and African states under the sanction conditions. And it shows that from Russia, the share of non-raw material and non-energetic exports, it amounts to 80%. So 80% of Russian export is non-raw materials and non-energy products. And almost 85% of the Russian export to Africa goes to only 7 states of the continent, which shows that there is a huge potential of expanding Russian export to other countries of the continent, while also expanding the export of African countries to our country. And Russia is on the 12th place upon the amount of its trade turnover with African countries. What we supply to African continent is the agricultural production, cyber technologies, and also these educational services and preparation of specialists and experts, components and machinery, mineral resources and fertilizers, and also some hydrocarbon resources. Okay, now upon the current economic and business ties between Russia and Africa. To date, Russia's trade turnover with Africa, according to various estimates, ranges from 14 to 18 billion dollars. Already in the first months of the last year, the growth of Russian-African trade turnover amounted to over 34%, compared with this volume for the same period in 2021. As for 2023, the trade turnover of agricultural products with African countries increased by 60% and reached more than $4.5 billion. Exports of Russian products to African countries almost doubled and amounted to more than $3 billion in the same period. So here on this slide, I'm also sorry, it is only in Russian, but it shows main partners of Russia on the African continent and the directions of cooperation with them. So here, for example, enumerated Morocco, Algeria, Mali, Nigeria, Central African Republic, Angola, South Africa, Zimbabwe, Egypt, Tunisia, Sudan, Eritrea, Ethiopia, but also many other countries, probably not mentioned on this slide, but they are also important partners for us. So, and one of the key products that Russia supplies to Africa is wheat or grain, and in the first half of this year, its supplies to the African continent tripled compared to the same period last year. And you see the figures on the slide. These are already unprecedented figures, but at the same time, the potential for growth in agricultural exports from Russia to the continent are far from exhausted. Russia accounts for about 20% of African wheat imports, 18% of barley imports, and more than 13% of vegetable oils as of this year. But also we have other agricultural products which are of demand in Africa, and I think that the trade turnover in this aspect will also continue to grow. In 2022, Russia supplied agricultural products to 43 African countries and was almost 5 billion, of which main part was accounted by wheat. So Russia, in this aspect, is doing a great job in helping Africa solve the food crisis. So now I would like to say a couple of words about educational cooperation between Russia and Africa. Of course, this educational cooperation also goes back to the times of the Soviet Union, when many specialists were prepared in our country, and they are still working in the African countries, and many of Russian and Soviet graduates became prominent figures in the political life of their countries, and also they prepared technical specialists and built schools and technical education institutions on the African continent. But also in the times of modern Russia, the educational cooperation, though on a smaller scale, but it continued. and now it shows the signs of the increasing volumes of African students. This was long talked about, but now this is happening. So in the final declaration of the second Russia-Africa summit, the partners agreed to develop cooperation in the field of education, promote participation in joint research projects, conduct various scientific conferences and other events, expand and deepen interaction between educational organizations of the Russian Federation and African states. And also they agreed to promote the implementation of professional training programs, academic and student exchanges, the study of the Russian language in the African countries, as well as the development of African studies in Russia. And the second summit, also some countries of the continent were allocated additional quotas in Russian universities. In general, in recent years, these quotas were already expanded, but now we see that the decision was taken to additionally expand. And in addition, the action plan of the Russia-Africa Partnership Forum till 2026 states that Russian Federation and Africa agreed to create a network of educational centers functioning in Russian language on the African continent, and also to create branches of educational organizations from the Russian Federation on the African continent. In addition, the parties will work on the introduction of Russian and African languages as foreign languages studied in general education organizations. This is very important, I think. And also in this regard, the Ministry of Education and Science of the Russian Federation signed memorandums of understanding in the field of higher education with several African countries. And also the African leaders, one of them, the head of the Republic of Guinea-Bissau, Maru Sissoco Mbalo, at the summit, he spoke about the importance of educating African people in Russia, and he called the educational sector one of the priorities of cooperation with the Russian Federation. Because Russian education is known for its quality and relatively lower cost of education than in other countries. Now, a couple of words about landmark bilateral and multilateral projects between Russia and Africa. Here on this slide, which is in Russian, we see how in many countries Russian companies work. Here mentioned, for example, Morocco, Algeria, Egypt, Cameroon, Sudan, Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, Republic of Congo, and Sierra Leone. And these are mainly minerals, like companies which are engaged in mining and hydrocarbons and so on, and also in construction. I would like to mention just a few of these Russian companies and what they do in Africa. For example, the Russian company Rусский, which deals with aluminium. It mines bauxite, which is a raw material for aluminium in the Republic of Guinea, and it is one of the largest foreign investors in this country. The company is also actively investing in the healthcare of this African country. For example, in 2015, Rусский, this Russian company, built and equipped the scientific clinical diagnostic center for epidemiology and microbiology in the city of Kindia, and it helped greatly to combat the Ebola virus. In addition, almost $13 million was allocated again to combat the epidemic of Ebola. And in 2017, this part of this clinical center was repurposed into a laboratory complex, which also did its contribution during already the new coronavirus pandemic. So it also helped the citizens of the Republic of Guinea. Also, I should mention the Rosatom State Corporation, which conducts projects of various scale in more than 20 African countries, and it helps to develop energy cooperation and research cooperation. Rosatom deals with nuclear energy, and to mention just the largest project, it is the Center for Nuclear Science and Technology in Zambia. The contract was signed in 2018, and it will include a nuclear research facility, a laboratory complex, and multi-purpose irradiation center and nuclear medicine center. And in July 2018, Rosatom signed also a cooperation agreement in the field of nuclear medicine with South African Nuclear Energy Corporation. And in 2019, the agreement was signed to build a nuclear science and technology center in Rwanda. Also, another project which was much talked about in the recent years, but sadly it was slowed by the pandemic and other events, but hopefully it will be realized starting from this year. This is a Russian industrial zone in Egypt. So the intergovernmental agreement between the Russian Federation and Egypt was signed in 2018 already to create a special zone in the east of the Egyptian city, Port Said. So it was like a special economic zone for Russian companies which would like to be resident there, but the full implementation of the project is expected to take 13 years, so there is still time. And it is a great chance for Russian companies to be present in this African country, which is vibrant and very develops very fast. And here, Russian resident companies would receive rental holidays, preferential tariffs for energy resources, so on. The start of the construction of the industrial zone was scheduled for 2020, but due to coronavirus pandemic, the deadlines have shifted. But now we hope that this year we'll see the beginning of this building of the construction of the infrastructure of this Russian industrial zone. And this is a very important project for Russian companies because it will open the access to the markets of many African countries. And to conclude with Russia, Africa, what the common future may bring. I hope that in future we will see the increased cooperation between Russia and all African countries in various spheres, not only in the sphere of politics and economics, but also as we see the signs that the cooperation in education, the cooperation in humanitarian sphere, in social dialogue, all the spheres are also very promising, and this cooperation is developing in recent years. So, and I think Russia and African countries are bound to develop cooperation in the sphere of education, in the sphere of healthcare, in the sphere of high technologies, because Russia has many know-hows that it would like and is ready to share with its African partners. Also, we should mention here digital technologies, medical technologies, space technologies, even agricultural technologies, geological expertise. So all these spheres will be developing, I think, in the coming years. Of course, the global situation is changing somehow unpredictably, but the history of Russian-African relations shows that Russia and the countries of the continent always had great interest in each other. And I hope this will make our common future brighter and more fruitful. And thank you very much for your attention. If you have any questions, I would be glad to try to answer them. Thank you so much.
Уважаемая Ольга Сергеевна, спасибо большое за такой подробный, интересный рассказ о тех отношениях, которые связывают сейчас Россию и Африку. У нас много вопросов. Olga Sergeyevna, thank you very much for your detailed, vast, and informative talk on the relations between Russia and Africa today. And we have a lot of questions in our chat. And so we have a few questions from Africa Development Council. It is a non-profit organization that was founded in this year to promote sustainable industrial development in Africa. And they ask, what are the top sectors that invest and trade between Russia and Africa?
The top one of the key products, as I said, it is agricultural production, and first of all, grain. Also, it is fertilizers. Very important, it is machinery. And also, Russia sells arms to African states, but this is a special degree of this is what I can say. But of course, one should check the recent changes, probably in the statistics of export, because it can change. But 80% of Russian export is non-raw material and non-energy.
Okay, thank you very much. So the next question is, what are the opportunities for collaboration between Russian and African universities and research institutions?
Of course, such cooperation already exists, and as far as I remember, there was also a forum of rectors, like heads of the universities, on the sides of the second Russia-Africa summit. So Russia is interested in the project of Pan-African University. So, and as far as I know, there is already cooperation between Ruden and Zambia. They opened courses which prepare students for studying later in Ruden. But some of the subjects and Russian language is already taught in Zambia. And this is like a digital also a digital story of education. So I think such digital and on-site projects of university cooperation, they will develop quickly in the coming years. And also in Russian universities, there is a process of preparing them to take more students, to take more international students, and to give them more courses in English language, because it is an international language of studies, and it will help many African students. If in Russian universities there will be more courses also in English. So this work is done currently and in recent years. So, and as you see, as I have mentioned on the second summit, a range of memorandums of understanding with African countries in the sphere of education and science. They were signed, and so hopefully it will all realize.
Thank you very much. So the next question is vital. How can Russia and Africa work together to ensure that future projects are sustainable and have a positive impact on African communities?
I think now, nowadays, like the business of all countries and also especially Russian companies, they understand about social responsibility of major businesses, and they try to make their projects sustainable. We, of course, try to to discuss all the projects with the African partners to make these projects mutually beneficial. And as you see, for example, the company Rусский, which I mentioned, it developed very positive healthcare infrastructure in the country where it works. And I know that Russian companies also develop similar projects which invest in the healthcare, in the education of people in these countries in which they are working. So, and I think this process will be developing. And of course, we need to do more research and, work in most close cooperation with the African partners to determine what they need more, what can be done for them by the Russian businesses.
Okay, so a few more questions. We even had a suggestion to establish a joint Russia-Africa Development Council diplomatic mission to coordinate and promote collaboration between two countries. And we have a question like that. Are there how BRICS will affect the relation between Russia and Africa countries whom joined the BRICS?
Of course, we all heard about the prospects of expanding the BRICS, and Russia is welcoming the new African countries to join the BRICS. I think, first of all, what will bring the future is that the cooperation between Russia and those African countries which will join BRICS, it will intensify in all the areas, and it will be definitely very positive. How will BRICS function exactly after the expansion? It is going to be seen. So, but I definitely think that BRICS is one of the pillars of this changing world order, and it is like a positive, probably another force for good in this world. And definitely we welcome African countries and other countries also. Not
Okay, thank you, Olga. And probably we are running out of time, and probably the last question. So it's quite practical. I'm an entrepreneur and I'm looking to work with the Russian entrepreneurs. What advice and guidance could you give me?
So you can contact Russian Trade and Commerce Chamber, which is located in Moscow, and there they have several bodies dealing with African businessmen. So they already have experience, and they can guide you. They can give you contacts of Russian entrepreneurs in your sphere, and also try to check if there is bilateral projects between your country and Russia. Probably there is a bilateral intergovernmental commission. Maybe they can also give you some guidance. And also you can try to contact the Russian embassy. They will also give you the advice on how to do business in Russia. This is probably the advice I can give.
Thank you very much, Olga. I remind you that our expert is Olga Kulkova, Senior Research Fellow in the Center for the Study of the Russian-African Relations and African States Foreign Policy at the Institute for Russian Studies in the Russian Academy of Science. Thank you very much. And I would like just to say a few words about our next webinar. It is going to be on the 26th of September. And actually, the next week, we're going to have 2 webinars, and both of them with the Pushkin State Russian Language Institute. So we are going to discuss how to enter Russian higher education, how you can got your grants to get to Russia. So please join the next webinar. Наш следующий вебинар состоится 26 и 27 сентября вместе с Институтом русского языка имени Пушкина. И на первой встрече с Юрием Викторовичем Копыловым, директором департамента международного сотрудничества Института Пушкина, мы поговорим об алгоритме поступления в высшее учебное заведение в России. Пожалуйста, присоединяйтесь, вы также сможете задать свои вопросы, и мы приглашаем всех желающих в Zoom. Ссылка будет выслана перед началом встречи. Я еще раз хочу поблагодарить за экспертное сообщение, выступление Ольгу Сергеевну Кулькову. Ольга, спасибо большое, и до следующих встреч. Всего доброго.
Спасибо всем за внимание. До свидания. До следующих встреч.